This is Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network, brought to you by the Iowa Soybean Association, your daily recap of the information that affects Iowa's farmers, producers, and consumers, right here in the heart of the heartland. With reports from our award-winning broadcast team of Dustin Hoffman and Riley Smith. Now, from the IARN studios in Des Moines, here's Dustin Hoffman.
Well, good day, everybody, and welcome back to Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Hoffman. Today is Tuesday, May the 3rd, 2022. We thank you for coming along. Coming up in today's show, Riley Smith takes a look at the South American weather and crop update. I talk with Iowa Renewable Fields Association Executive Director Monte. We also have a check of your ag weather outlook, but first, let's run down those markets. It's time now for the Ag Matters PM Closing Market Summary, your source for market analysis and settlement prices from the day's trade in Chicago, courtesy of the folks at agmarket.net. Well, we're at Tuesday's close of the markets, and now we're going to turn to Bill Biedermann of agmarket.net. Bill, thanks for taking the time to visit today.
You bet. Another wild day in the markets.
All right, so let's take note of what happened. What happened with corn and beans out there today?
Well, we had a really good start to the day because crop conditions showed that the crop's basically not getting in the ground very fast. And according to the forecast, it's probably going to be slow going the coming week. So a lot of traders came in thinking the market was going to remain firm and start reflecting the idea that getting a record yield 2 years in a row is pretty low probability. But the sellers came in and we started seeing funds selling about mid-morning, based on fears that the economy was going to continue to start to show signs of weakness. And we ended up the day lower across the board.
All right. So what's it going to take, you think, we obviously know that what goes up comes down, and a little back and forth isn't the end of the world. But we also know that we're sitting in some new territories here on some of these prices. I mean, what are things that what could make it rebound and come back up? What could be a signal that things may be turning around?
Well, I think the things that are negative are the reality that no matter what, the farmer is going to get the crop planted, right? I mean, there's only been 1 year in my career where they didn't get it all in the ground, and that was 1993. So I don't think we're repeating that, number one. Number two, yeah, we're getting a late start. There's absolutely no question to that, Dustin, but when do we get done? Are we going to still get done within the window where you can produce a good yield? And for a lot of folks, especially between Interstate 80 and Interstate 72, the answer to that is yeah, we will get it done on time. But now you go further north of that, up into the Dakotas and into the plains, obviously they're going to get started really late. So they're only going to have about 6 days to get the crop planted to still stay in that window. And the likelihood of that is probably pretty low. This is going to be a real puzzle, and it's going to give the buyer and the seller reasons to go into the market, selling one day because they think they'll get in the market, buying the next day because they think that we've passed that probability of a record yield. And I want to talk about that for just a second. In order for the USDA to come out next week with the numbers they have, which they're probably going to use 180 or 181 bushel yield, that's 3 to 4 bushels above the last record. By the way, the last record was set last year. So now I look up probabilities. What are the probabilities we exceed previous records by 3 to 4 bushels? Not real high. What is the probability that you have back-to-back record yields? Not even close to being high. So we've got two statistical reasons to think that the numbers that we get next week will probably be the most bearish numbers we get all season. It's going to take a miracle weather to prove me wrong on that.
You know, and it's interesting. I think back to 2019 where we had planters rolling in June. And, you know, thankfully around here, now up in the Dakotas, it wasn't quite the same, but thankfully around here, fall lasted longer than it normally would have. We got some hot temperatures that hung around longer, and we were able to bring it home. By no means a record crop, but it was still a decent showing for the timetable we had when we went in. So, I mean, even if we get in late, it's not necessarily a given that this is a failure either.
That's correct. I mean, you're exactly right. It all depends on that summer weather. We got pollination, we got fill, we got finish. Those are, as we know, in the last 10 years have become very critical to determining the yield. So the cat's going to be out of the bag, but in the overall general picture, the probabilities of us having a back-to-back record year and a record that exceeds previous record by 3 to 4 bushels, those probabilities are statistically extremely low. So I do think that they will use those numbers on next week's report. That'll be probably the most bearish numbers we see.
All right, and of course, with the grain prices being what they are, that always has an effect on livestock, but even hogs, I mean, they just seem to be having a negative effect across the board. But what are things looking like today as we close those livestock markets?
Well, yeah, so the livestock yesterday had a massive outside day turnaround and the highest volume day traded in a very long time. It could be largest volume for the whole contract. I'm not sure. But bottom line is we had a huge reversal. It's very critical now that technically we hold that low. We do have a large gap above the charts. So we believe that the cattle market, as long as the cash holds strong, we are seeing the select gain over the choice. So that's a good sign. If we continue to see that, that should mean demand is coming in for this stuff, and maybe we'll get them bounce back up and fill the gaps. The gaps are $3 to $4 higher than we're currently trading. So that's really good. The feeder cattle is amazing, the strength that we saw in that. Not only yesterday, but today, back to back, right? One after consecutive day. Just because the corn market is flat, I don't think it's just because of that. I think it's because we're seeing these calves getting cleaned up pretty quick at auction. With the drought out west, we've seen a lot of that come to the market. People are not stupid. They're taking advantage of that, and they're going to snap those things up. That's going to leave a void down the road. And over in the hog industry, that to me, I don't really follow the fundamentals of the hogs very much, but technically that market looks like it's starting to get oversold. On the July contract, the moving averages is down around 101. So we still have a little more room, $1 or $2 down, until we really start seeing the support come in.
All right. Well, a lot of great information, Bill. And if folks want to talk market strategies and talk about what they can do with their marketing plans, how do they get in touch with the folks there at agmarket.net?
Yeah. So the easiest way to get a hold of us is, of course, to just go online to agmarket.net, right? That's what's cool about it. The other way would be to call us at 844-4AGMARKET. We're here to talk anytime anybody wants to give us a call. We'd love to spend a little bit of time consulting with you.
All right, Bill. Well, thanks for the insight as always. We'll talk again real soon.
Okay. Thanks, Dustin.
That again was Bill Biedermann of agmarket.net here on Ag Matters PM. Let's take a look at how those markets closed, courtesy of the folks at Bar Chart. July corn was down 10.5 at $7.93 even. December new crop down 7 at $7.35 1/4. July beans down 14 3/4 at $16.30 1/2. November down 12 1/4 at $14.78 1/4. Soy meal was down $7 at $4.23.90. Soy oil up 19 cents at $80.28. Chicago wheat down a dime at $10.45 1/2. Minneapolis wheat down 12 1/4 at $11.55 1/2. Kansas wheat down 5 1/4 at $10.92 3/4. July oats up 18 1/2 at $6.72 1/2. On the livestock side, August live cattle up 27 cents at $137.32. May feeders up 97 cents at $162.40. June lean hogs $277 lower at $102.20. Pork cutouts down $2.97 at $108.87, and Class 3 milk was unchanged at $24.23. That's been your Ag Market Recap on the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network's Ag Matters PM program. We're going to take a short break and hear from our sponsor, the Iowa Soybean Association and the Soy Checkoff. When we come back, Riley Smith has an update from the South American crop and weather reports. This is Ag Matters PM.
Iowa Soybean Association is driven to deliver for Iowa's 40,000 soybean farmers. We're proud to provide objective agronomic research, a helping hand with soil and water stewardship, and timely industry news powered by the Soybean Checkoff. Learn more at iasoybeans.com.
Welcome back to AM/PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Huffman. Each week we take a look at what's happening in the farms of South America and how their crop is progressing. Riley Smith has this week's report.
Well, we're talking here with Allendale commodity broker Greg McBride for this week's South American weather and crop update. Greg, what did we see in the weather patterns for Brazil and Argentina?
Still talking dryness in in Brazil, where they're trying to finish out their corn crop, the second crop corn, safrinha crop. So that is a concern because you're anywhere from pollination to kernel fill at this point. And so that'll be something to see on the next USDA report, the next CONAB update, is to see if they start to pull back on some of those production estimates. You're also seeing some cold weather in Argentina that is going to affect a little bit of that quality as they are working on harvest for corn and beans currently. And the 6 to 10 day forecast much the same. And the 11 to 15 day, there is some rain coming in for Argentina, a little bit for Brazil, but nothing that's really substantial that should hold them back too greatly.
And Greg, what are we seeing as far as crop progress for both countries?
Brazil currently 94% harvested on soybeans. That would put them in line with last year, puts them in line with the 5-year average. So coming to a close at this point, nothing to be concerned about there. On the first crop corn harvest, they are just slightly ahead of the 5-year average at 87% right now. So again, with the drier bias in the weather, they're getting a lot of harvest completed here. So looking good there. And as I mentioned, with their safrinha crop, that is where the concern comes in because that is the bigger of their corn crops. So if the production numbers start to fall on that will be a significant hit to them. Yeah, Argentina not seeing as big of a push into the corn harvest at this point. They are focusing more on their soybean harvest, which is at 46.4% harvested currently. Corn harvest still lagging behind just a little bit at 24.6. But with some of those clear skies, they should be moving along without any major issues. Like I did mention, they do have some frost and freeze concerns, so that will basically take and finish off some of those areas that might have still needed a few weeks to go. But as far as anything, they are still moving along fairly quickly with the drier conditions that they've got.
And Greg, for the past few weeks, we've seen the crop ratings continue to drop pretty much every time we hear about those updates for Brazil and Argentina. What effect has the weather been having there?
Yeah, a lot of that is just earlier frosts, earlier freezes in Argentina that will take a crop and basically just shut it off. That finishes the growing cycle for them, and that is a problem. If you're not far enough along, you can also see some bean shatter in that situation as well. And then on the Brazil side of things with the dryness, that is a major concern that they've already faced at least once this year. So now we're going into the close of their harvest for the first crop, and trying to finish out their second crop corn, and that is a concern because obviously with drier temperatures they don't have the irrigation system that we normally would have. They also have a different type of soil, so that they need to see increased rains. And at this time of the year, this is when things do start to go drier for them anyway. So the fact that they are a little bit ahead might help, but it is not something you want to see to finish out that safrinha crop of corn.
Now, when countries like Brazil and Argentina have crop issues, that's usually a good thing for U.S. grain prices, and of course it still is. However, with all that spotlight on U.S. crops, wouldn't you say there's a lot of pressure for them to perform well this year, and they've got a bit of stage fright?
It does, and that's one of the reasons that we've got prices as elevated as they are. We're seeing some spillover pricing because of the problems that South America, specifically Brazil, has had. I don't think we'd be nearly as high if they hadn't had some of those problems. We've also seen some spillover buying come into the soybeans as well. Soybeans have normally don't see very good sales after February, and this year we've seen good sales throughout. So we are on pace to exceed the USDA's whole year goal by the end of August. And that looks to be similar for corn. It hasn't been as great with corn as we thought, but we are still seeing some sales, and we are expected to exceed the USDA's goal there. It's just a matter of time. As long as we're able to ship, we should be sitting pretty here. The one thing I would be a little bit concerned about is as we are trying to fight inflation here in the U.S. and we look at the Fed looking to raise interest rates maybe by a half a basis point or 3/4 of a basis point here this week. That is going to drive the dollar up, and that a lot of times will put pressure on our market. So the dollar being at 20-year highs is going to be an issue. Now's the time that it would start to be an issue. You may have a lot of things that are very bullish in these markets, whether it's dryness in South America, whether it's a planting issue here in the United States, or the Ukraine-Russia situation. But if the price of corn or soybeans or even wheat at this point with a higher dollar becomes unattractive to some of our customers, that is where we could suffer, and that's where the prices could take a hit.
All right, Greg, and do you have any other advice for Iowa producers who are listening in today?
At this point, it's to continue to watch. I've been consistent with the idea that I don't really believe planting delays here in the U.S. are a major issue until about mid to late May. You do see some yields come off of it, but it's not significant. It's not as significant as if we were to go dry in say June and July especially with pollination. But it is something to keep an eye on. Obviously, the situation over in the Ukraine with Russia, that is not getting any better. That seems like, from what we've heard there, the Russians are now starting to target some of the grain depots for the Ukrainians, and that takes them out of the export game altogether. They had started to work out ways to get shipments from Bulgaria and get shipments moving outside of their own ports, especially that Odessa port, where they send most of their corn and wheat. So that is something that we do need to watch and keep an eye on. And as of today, we are seeing a little bit of a turnaround Tuesday after yesterday's crop progress and crop conditions numbers. So that looks okay, but we've got to be very careful about like what we saw yesterday, seeing the markets kind of take a step back after seeing a little bit of uncertainty to close out last week.
Lots of great information as always, Greg. And for those of our listeners and farmers producers who want to get a hold of you at Allendale, how can they do that?
They can call us at 800-2-MARKET. That's 800-262-7538.
And that was Greg McBride of Allendale here on Ag Matters PM. I'm Riley Smith.
Thanks, Riley. And now let's take a look at that ag weather outlook. What was supposed to be a day of clouds moving out of the area turned into a day of the clouds hanging on for dear life. Now, we did get some sun breaking through here off and on, but not enough to write home about. Of course, we're going to see the sunshine start to return as of tomorrow, but if you're worried about rain, don't worry, there's more following right behind it. So let's see what the National Weather Service has to say. Well, as you can see, showers were moving off throughout the day, depending on where you were. Check local listings. But we started to see some breaks of the sun in the west, and eventually those gradually made their way across. Now tonight, that rain is going to finish pushing its way out of the state, and we'll see variably cloudy skies, depending on where you're located. But tomorrow, those clouds are going to kind of just hang around a little bit. We'll see breaks of sun in most places, and depending on where you are. And, of course, we'll see that rain start to move right back in again into the southwest part of the state today as we look for a pretty wet next couple of days. Taking a quick peek at the affiliate weather picture for tomorrow, we'll see Cherokee having partly sunny skies and 59. Shenandoah, mostly cloudy skies, a few peaks of sun, but rain returns in the afternoon and a high 61. Des Moines, partly sunny and 62. Waterloo will be partly cloudy to mostly sunny, depending on your philosophical leanings, and a high of 61. Albia will be partly sunny and 61. Clinton will be partly sunny and 62. For detailed forecasts in your area, tune to your local Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network affiliate. That's been a check of our ag weather outlook. We're going to take a quick break here, and when we come back, I sit down with Monte Shaw, Executive Director of the Iowa Renewable Fuels Association. This is Ag Matters PM.
As we approach planting season, make sure you stay safe and share the road with your local farmers.
Slow-moving tractors with large planters occupy a lot of space on the road, so stay patient and follow at a distance of around 50 feet. You should never, ever try to pass them at a bridge, intersection, hill, or curve. It's far better than putting yourself or someone else at risk. So please, stay safe and remember to tip your hat to your local farmer this planting season. This message was brought to you by your friends at the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network.
Welcome back to AM/PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. I'm Dustin Huffman. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds is set to sign the biofuels access bill within the next few days. It was a piece of legislation that came with a lot of debate. We talk with Iowa Renewable Fuels Association Executive Director Monte Shaw to hear his take on what it's going to mean. Monte, thanks for taking the time to visit with us.
Glad to be on. Thanks for having me.
So we've got a lot of things happening in biofuels here in the last week or so. Not that it hasn't been happening before, but more stuff has come up. And first, let's start with the fact that there's going to be a bill signing coming up very soon from Governor Reynolds with the bill that went through the legislature, helping us clear the way for E15. Tell us about that and what that's going to mean for Iowa and how that's going to help maybe influence things at the federal level too.
Well, we're just very excited. So Governor Reynolds led an Iowa Biofuels Access Bill. It was a 2-year effort. We finally got it through the legislature, and it really puts Iowa in the lead for biofuels policy. I hate to ever be nice to states like Minnesota or whatever, but Iowa's always been the number one producer of ethanol. We haven't always been the policy leader, so we're pretty excited to kind of claim both hats. So what's going to happen is very simple. It started from the premise that every single Iowan deserves access to E15, the choice to choose at the pump. If you want to pay more for a different fuel, knock yourself out. But we want every Iowan to be able to find that low-cost E15 option. So the bill says for retailers, if you have compatible equipment, you're going to offer E15 by 2026. And then the state essentially partners with those retailers by providing waivers if you have old, outdated equipment that won't work with it, but also a big expansion of a grant program to help them do minor upgrades to offer E15 if those are necessary, as well as a tax credit once they sell it. So it's really going to be a win for consumers who can save 10 to 30 cents a gallon at the pump. It's going to be a win for farmers who can see a growth market opportunity with the higher blends. And well, they don't always see it that way. Some do, some don't. We honestly think in the long run, it's going to be a win for retailers who have another tool in their toolbox to keep people coming to their stations, especially as we see all these EV electric vehicle mandates and stuff coming from the states. We need to show there's a path forward, a low emissions path forward for liquid fuels as well.
It's interesting you brought up the other retailers because, any legislation is going to have its opponents, and we know that. But, hearing the argument that this was going to place an unnecessary burden on some of these small retailers. I mean, the governor had been on here earlier and said, that there's plenty of programs and pieces in the bill that will to make sure that these small retailers don't go under. Because the last thing the governor said she wanted to see was a small town that maybe has one gas station have a financial burden on that one gas station.
Yeah, that was one of the most unfortunate things about the debate over the last couple of years. Is I think that there were some I want to say this clearly. I think there were some very sincere concerns by retailers out there that this bill could put them in a bad position. But I think they were being given information that, in my opinion, wasn't accurate. Okay, someone else thought it was. Apparently, that's fine. But from the very beginning, we tried to have all kinds of safety valves for retailers that had old equipment. No one was going to, force someone to break concrete, replace a whole new tank underground and do this because that would be cost prohibitive. And think about it. Why would we want that? If you go out of business, you're not selling E10, let alone E15, right? I mean, there's no one wanted that. This bill has 3 different waiver provisions. It has a huge grant program. It has tax credits for once you sell the fuel. It's bent over backwards. I would argue that, probably has more in there to protect retailers than you really need, but that's the way the legislators wanted it. And none of us ever wanted to have this be a problem. What we do want to say is, look, there's retailers out there that haven't thought about E15. They need to. There's also retailers out there whose hands are tied by the big oil contracts that fly their flag. And so those contracts say you can't offer E15. Well, this law changes that. So this is about giving a new choice to consumers. You're still going to find E10. you're still going to find the non-ethanol blends. It costs a lot of money. And like I said, if you want to pay the extra money for a substandard fuel, that's your business. But Iowans deserve the choice of E15. We think all Americans do. So we're hoping that we can not just export our ethanol in the future, but now as a leader, we can export our ethanol policy as well. And we're already talking to a couple of states.
That again was Iowa Renewable Fuels Association Executive Director Monte Shaw. We'll have more features from him in the coming days about the very exciting month they had in April. That's it for this episode of Ag Matters PM from the Iowa Agribusiness Radio Network. We thank you for joining us. You can find all our content online at iowaagnet.com. You can also find our free twice daily podcasts on Amazon, Apple, Google, Podbean, and Spotify. You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, and find all our video content, as well as previous episodes of Ag Matters PM on our YouTube channel. From the IRN studios in Des Moines, I'm Dustin Huffman. For Riley Smith, we thank you for watching. This has been Ag Matters PM.